The control chamber of Lumen Mining Colony pulsed in crimson light. Warning sirens were muted by design. Miners preferred silence to shrieking alarms. But the glow was enough to paint every crystalline wall in the shade of blood. Kale, senior watch officer, sat stiff in his chair, the facets of his crystal-formed hands refracting red as he worked the console. The room smelled faintly of ozone, wires straining to carry too much current. Across from him, young Lear's eyes widened as the long-range display resolved into shapes. At first just blips, cold mathematical dots. Then their formation sharpened. Not drifting rocks, not merchant ships, not anything natural. Lear's voice cracked. Multiple contacts. Vector stable. Closing fast, how many? Kale asked, though his throat felt too dry for words. Lear counted the signatures one by one, and the silence stretched until it felt unbearable. Finally, he whispered, 27. The word hit the chamber like a hammer on glass. Mira, the colony elder, entered slowly, leaning on her staff. Her form, translucent and aged, carried the wisdom of decades, but the weight in her voice revealed fear. A fleet, she said. A war formation, no one answered. They didn't have to. For generations, Lumen had been a sanctuary. Tucked in the rim sectors, it was a place of harvesters and builders, not warriors. Their world's value lay beneath the crust, veins of mineral the Council relied upon for industry. Life here was simple. Ships came and went, contracts were fulfilled, and children grew up never seeing more than a freighter's hull. Violence was something that belonged to history records, not lived memory, but the blips on the screen mocked that illusion. Kale tapped the console, amplifying the sensor image. Hulls black as void, edges sharpened into blades of metal advancing in flawless lines. Stories called them the Night Brood, raiders who stripped colonies to the bone, then left only silence. No one ever reported survivors. No one ever described their mercy. Mira's voice quivered. The Council is weeks away. Even if we send a courier, their fleets will never reach us in time. Kale felt the weight of 5,000 lives pressing down on his chest. Families, children, elders, every soul beneath this fragile dome trusted him to keep them safe. Yet all he had were meteor shields, docking clamps, and defensive codes designed for pirates, not an armada. Against 27 warships, those were pebbles against a tidal wave. Lyre broke the silence. Sir, what do we do? His eyes gleamed with terror, but also with trust. Kale looked at the beacon switch on the console, a relic covered in dust. It was the forbidden option, an outlawed frequency that connected only to one place, one people. The Council had declared it never to be used, not under any circumstances. Yet it glowed faintly, as though waiting for the moment when desperation would outweigh law. Kale's crystalline fingers hovered above it. He whispered, more to himself than anyone else. When no one else comes, who do you call? The red lights pulsed, the enemy drew closer, and the colony held its breath. The chamber felt heavier with every passing second. The red glow still pulsed like a heart beating too fast, too fragile. Kyle stood motionless before the console, his hand hovering over the beacon switch. No one dared to speak, not even Lear, whose questions had dried into silence. The forbidden option. It was not just a button. It was history itself, buried in law and fear. Generations ago, when the Council first spread across the stars, they had stumbled upon a species unlike any other, the Terrans. Born on a planet of crushing storms and violent gravity, they were stronger, faster, and infinitely more dangerous than most. The archives described them as Deathworlders, creatures forged by chaos, tempered by pain. At first, they had been allies. The Terrans had shared their knowledge, offered protection in trade lanes, fought off the early predators of the Rim. But with strength came fear. The Council worried what might happen if such beings chose conquest instead of guardianship. So the vote was passed. Terrans were cast out of political halls bound by treaties, forbidden from intervening in Council territories unless summoned by the emergency beacon. And that beacon was to remain dark. Always. Kale's mind wrestled with the dilemma. If he pressed it, he would not just summon help. He would shatter law, betray trust, risk the wrath of the Council itself. Yet what law mattered if 5,000 lives were erased in fire and steel? Mira's voice, fragile yet sharp, broke the silence. You are thinking of them. Kale turned, startled. You know what this means. I was alive when the ban was passed, Mira said. We feared the Terrans because they reminded us of the storms we could never control. But I also remember the stories of those they saved. Convoys that returned home because Terran ships stood between them and raiders. Stations rebuilt after disasters because their hands did not rest until the last child was found. Her eyes, pale with age, met his. You fear what the Council will say. But what will they say if our colony is nothing but wreckage? If our children never see another dawn? Lear swallowed hard. They call them dangerous, he said timidly. But isn't that what we need now? Someone dangerous enough to fight for us? Kyle closed his eyes. The truth was plain. Every second wasted was a second closer to annihilation. The night brood ships advanced relentlessly. Soon they would drop from void space, unleash their cutters, and strip Lumen bare. His fingers trembled, but he lowered them onto the beacon switch. The console resisted at first, as though reluctant to break its silence. Then, with a crackle of static, the old system hummed to life, lights flickering in a color different from the crimson of alarm. Deep blue, almost solemn. Kale composed the message in Old Common, the language of bridges the tongue even children knew. His words were simple, stripped of pride, stripped of protocol. This is Lumen Mining Colony, Sector K7. Hostile fleet inbound. We are unarmed. There are children here. Please, help. The signal leapt into the void. For a moment, silence reclaimed the chamber. No instant answer, no miraculous salvation. Just the faint echo of Kale's own breath in his ears. He shut his eyes again. It's done, he whispered. Outside, the stars glittered cold and merciless. Somewhere among them, perhaps, the Deathworlders would hear. Perhaps they would remember what it meant to answer a cry in the dark, and perhaps they would come. Far from the rim, where the void stretched like a black ocean without shores, the Terran vessel Aegir prowled through hyperslip. Its hull was dark, scarred from old battles, yet carried an aura of endurance. Inside, corridors hummed with the pulse of reactors built to weather storms that would tear lesser ships apart. In the command deck, Commander Rourke leaned over the central display. His face was rugged, lined by years of service under crushing gravities and unforgiving skies. The Terran uniform he wore was simple, practical. No medals, no finery, only the weight of command. Sir, said the comms officer, a woman with cropped hair and a voice steady as steel. You'll want to hear this. The speakers crackled, carrying a fragile message across the gulf of space. Static at first, then a voice, trembling, desperate. This is Lumen Mining Colony, Sector K7. Hostile fleet inbound. We are unarmed. There are children here. Please, help. The bridge fell silent. The words hung heavy like the toll of an old bell. Every Terran on that deck knew what it meant. The forbidden beacon had been lit. After centuries of silence, someone had dared to call them again. Rourke's jaw tightened. Confirm the source. Verified, sir, replied the navigator. Sector K7 Outer Rim. The colony is exactly where the archives say it should be. Council territory, another officer muttered. They won't like us moving in. Rourke straightened. Council politics be damned. That's a distress call. Out here you don't ignore a voice begging for help. Not if you're human. The crew exchanged glances. They had been raised on stories, not of conquest but of responsibility. On Terra, seas once ruled by storms had forged a law among sailors. A call unanswered is a life betrayed. Even now, among the stars, that law endured. Sir, said his tactical officer cautiously. We're talking about the Night Brood. 20 or more warships, full raiding formation. If we intercept, we'll be outnumbered 3-1. Rourke's eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in focus. Then we fight smarter. Our ships were built for storms, not show. The Brood has never faced gravitic warfare. They'll learn what it means to pick the wrong prey. The comms officer hesitated. Should I notify Earth Command? Yes, Rourke said. But by the time the Council debates and votes, it'll be over. Plot interception. Maximum burn, engines roared to life. The Aegir surged forward, her escorts falling into a hunting formation around her. Their hulls gleamed faintly, predatory against the endless dark. On the bridge, Rourke's gaze remained locked on the stars. He thought of the voice in the transmission, weary, breaking on the word children. That single word had sealed his choice. He whispered, not for the crew, but for himself. We were made dangerous for a reason. Time to remind the galaxy why. The Terran fleet turned toward K7, carving fire through the void. The first shadows fell across Lumen's sky like a plague of black wings. Children pressed their faces to the crystal windows of the refuge chambers, watching as the stars vanished behind iron hulls. 27 ships emerged from the void, each one shaped like a blade sharpened to cut worlds open. Their engines burned with pale fire, cold and merciless. From the control chamber, Kale watched the feed, his crystalline hands trembling against the console. The night brood had arrived. Their formation was perfect, their movements precise. Predators circling prey that could not fight back. "Shields to maximum," Kale ordered, though he knew the words were hollow. Lumen's defenses were designed to repel falling debris, not coordinated barrages. The first volley came without warning. A rain of energy tore into the orbital plates, peeling away metal like wet paper. Sparks cascaded in brilliant showers as alarms howled across the colony's underground levels. Lear flinched as the tremors rattled the chamber. "They're testing us," he whispered. "No," Kale said, voice hard. "They already know we're helpless. They're savoring it." The brood ship split into groups, some maintaining orbit, others deploying cutters. Like insects with steel jaws, the cutters descended toward the colony's surface, drilling through domes, prying at airlocks. Their goal was not annihilation. Not yet. They wanted to strip the colony bare. Equipment, minerals, food, bodies. Everything of value. In the subterranean shelters, families huddled together, their glowing forms dimmed with fear. The colony's internal systems shifted into labyrinth mode. False tunnels sealed, decoy cores lit with counterfeit energy signatures, caches relocated. Kale had activated every trick their ancestors had designed. A maze to delay predators. Not defeat them, but delay was all they could hope for. On the surface, Mira stood near one of the viewports, her staff steady even as the sky burned. "We are glass in the hands of hammers," she murmured. Kyle clenched his fists. "Glass can still cut if it shatters the right way." The brood's voices crackled over public channels, distorted and cruel. "Surrender your stockpiles. Deliver your young. Resist and we take everything." Kale muted the broadcast, bile rising in his throat. He thought of the beacon, of the fragile signal he had sent racing into the void. "Please, someone hear us." Lear's eyes darted to him. "Sir, do you think they'll come?" "The Terrans?" Kale hesitated, watching as another barrage hammered against their shields, sparks leaping like dying stars. The defense grid flickered. Minutes, perhaps less, until it collapsed. "I don't know," Kyle admitted. His voice cracked for the first time. "But if they don't, then today is our last dawn." The chamber shook violently. Somewhere above, an entire dome collapsed, the sound of breaking crystal echoing like thunder. The brood were no longer probing. They were taking, and still the stars remained empty. The colony trembled as another wave of fire hammered the shields. Crystal domes cracked. Air hissed through ruptures before emergency seals snapped into place. For the 5,000 souls buried beneath the surface, the end felt near. Kale gripped the console, watching helplessly as the shield meter bled toward zero. His voice rasped. "Another volley like that and we're finished." Lear's small voice broke. "They'll breach within minutes." And then the stars changed. The tactical screen lit up with a ripple of distortion. Hyperslip tore open like a wound in space, and shapes burst forth, burning with raw momentum. Sleek hulls of steel gray, marked with symbols no colonist had seen in generations. They came in formation, not rigid like the brood, but fluid, alive like a hunting pack. Kale's breath caught. Terrans. The largest ship led the charge, engines blazing brighter than suns. Its escorts peeled outward, weaving through the void with impossible precision. Before the brood could react, a pulse erupted from the lead vessel. Invisible waves slammed into the nearest raider cruiser. Its hull buckled inward, drive coils collapsing under crushing force. In seconds, the ship spun lifelessly, its formation broken. Across the control chamber, stunned silence gave way to disbelief. The forbidden call had been answered. On the bridge of the Aegir, Commander Rourke stood like iron. "First blood drawn," he said. "Now break their line. Target engines and reactors. Leave them stranded." Terran ships moved like predators in storm surf. Gravitic lashers struck again and again, pinching space around enemy drives until they imploded with shrieks of tearing metal. Where the brood relied on overwhelming numbers, the Terrans relied on endurance. Hulls that shrugged off volleys. Crews trained to fight as if their very bones belonged to the void. The battle was chaos made art. Brood ships vomited fire into the dark. their cutters still clawing at the colony surface. But the Terrans were relentless. Smaller strike craft darted close, unleashing bursts of kinetic fire that shattered raider gun arrays. Others dragged gravitic fields across enemy hulls, crushing armor like wet clay. Every strike was brutal, efficient, final. In the colony shelters, families lifted their heads as the tremors shifted. No longer the rhythm of assault, but the deeper rumble of battle beyond their walls. Hope flickered in frightened eyes. For the first time since the alarms began, children whispered, "They're fighting back." Kyle stared at the feed, hardly daring to blink. "They came," he whispered. "By the stars, they actually came." Above, the brood tried to regroup, but their perfect formation shattered under Terran aggression. A second cruiser lost its drives. A third was boarded as Terran Marines hurled themselves across the void in armored suits, slamming into hulls like living meteors. The tide had shifted, yet the battle was far from over. The brood still outnumbered them 3-1. And though the Terrans were dangerous, even storms could break. But for Lumen, hope had returned. The darkness was no longer empty. The sky above Lumen burned with fire. Wreckage from shattered brood ships rained down in streaks of molten light, hissing as it tore through the colony's thin atmosphere. The surface trembled with every impact, but amidst the chaos something new descended. Not cutters, not raiders, but sleek drop pods streaking down from Terran ships. Their hulls glowed red with re-entry, tails of plasma carving lines across the heavens. Kyle and Lear watched the feeds in silence. Every colonist huddled in the shelters held their breath. For generations, the Terrans had been little more than myth, whispers of steel warriors who carved order out of chaos. And now those myths were about to walk upon their soil. The first pods struck like meteors, slamming into ground near breached domes. Hydraulic clamps snapped open and armored figures emerged through the smoke. Each stood nearly twice the height of a colonist, encased in matte plating, weapons bristling with alien precision. Their visors burned with a cold light, scanning the battlefield with mechanical calm. "Terran Marines," Liar whispered, voice quaking with awe. The brood cutters had already torn holes in the colony's surface. Raiders poured in, snarling through their comms, dragging chains and plasma blades. They surged toward the shelters like locusts. But the Terrans met them head-on. The first clash was merciless. Terran rifles roared, firing slugs accelerated by gravitic cores. Each round tore through brood armor as if it were glass. The front ranks collapsed in sprays of crimson mist. Grenades followed, pulsing with condensed energy, ripping entire squads apart in silent bursts of light. But the brood were not cowards. They swarmed, 100 strong, their cutters spitting arcs of molten steel. They climbed over the bodies of their dead, screeching battle hymns into the night. The Terrans did not retreat. They advanced. A squad of Marines moved in disciplined formation, their heavy boots shaking the crystal ground. Each step was measured, each shot purposeful. Where the brood fought like wild animals, the Terrans moved like a single organism, precision woven into every motion. One Marine raised a weapon longer than Kale's entire body. A single discharge sent a wave of pressure blasting down a tunnel, flattening anything inside. Another drew a blade, its edge shimmering with compressed energy, and carved through a dozen raiders as if they were paper. Cal could hardly breathe as he watched the slaughter unfold. Terror and awe mingled in his chest. These were no saviors of light. These were storm gods cloaked in steel, carrying war wherever they tread. Yet without them, the colony would already be ash. The shelters shook again as brood forces detonated charges near the outer defenses. Families screamed as debris rained down. Kale gritted his teeth. "They're trying to force us into the open." Mira stood beside him, eyes calm despite the chaos. "Then let the Terrans be our storm." Outside, the battle intensified. Brood reinforcements poured from their cutters, claws scraping against crystal, jaws flashing. But the Terrans answered with overwhelming brutality. Drop pods continued to fall, each one delivering more warriors into the fray. Tanks unfolded from orbital containers, their cannons tearing craters through enemy ranks. And then a silence fell. Over the colony's public channel, a voice cut through the noise. Deep, harsh, commanding. A Terran voice. "People of Lumen, stay within your shelters. Do not resist. Do not flee. The night brood dies today, and or we do." The words echoed like scripture. For the first time since the invasion began, Kale saw his people lift their heads not in fear but in grim defiance. The Terrans had arrived. The brood's nightmare reign had met a wall of iron. And though the colony lay broken and bleeding, it still breathed, because war had come wearing human faces. The battlefield quieted only in moments like the hush between lightning and thunder. Smoke curled over shattered domes, rising from molten craters where brood corpses lay in heaps. The ground was slick with ash and ichor. The air tasted of metal and fire. Kale leaned against the console, watching the feeds flicker with static. Terran boots pressed deeper into the colony's veins, hunting down every last raider. The brood, once arrogant in their overwhelming numbers, now scattered like vermin in the light. Their cutters lay broken, their ships crippled in orbit. Victory, unthinkable hours ago, was at hand. And yet Kale's chest was heavy. On the main screen, a squad of Marines executed fleeing brood warriors without hesitation. No mercy, no quarter. Even wounded raiders were dispatched with a single shot to the head. The Terrans were efficient, clinical. To them this was not salvation, it was extermination. Lear whispered, "We're safe now, aren't we?" Kale hesitated before answering. For now. In the shelters, colonists stirred. Families crawled out from hiding, drawn by the sounds of battle fading above. They gathered in clusters, glowing bodies dimmed by fear but flickering with the faintest embers of hope. Children peered upward through cracks in the crystal walls, watching armored giants stride past like titans. The Terrans ignored them. They did not stop to reassure, did not comfort. They were focused only on the fight and its aftermath. One Marine paused at the mouth of a shelter, visor gleaming. For a heartbeat, Kale thought the warrior might speak. Instead, the giant lifted a hand, scanning the colonist with a device strapped to his gauntlet. Symbols flashed across his visor. Then he turned and marched away without a word. The message was clear. You are not our priority. Hours passed, and the last echoes of resistance faded. Terran banners unfurled on the broken surface, symbols of authority pressed into alien soil. Drones scoured the wreckage, cataloging salvage. The brood's dead were piled into burning pits. The Terrans fallen were retrieved with ceremony, sealed in gleaming pods that ascended back toward orbit. For the colonists, silence should have meant peace. But instead it felt like a weight pressing down, thicker than the smoke. In the control chamber, Kale's comms crackled. A voice deep and authoritative filled the room. "This is Commander Rourke of the Terran Alliance. The Night Brood's assault has been repelled. Your colony now falls under Alliance protection. Effective immediately." The words were sharp, deliberate. Not an offer, but a decree. Kyle swallowed. Protection. The word should have been a blessing. But wrapped inside it was a chain, Rourke continued. Your beacon was unauthorized. Your people's existence has remained hidden for centuries. That ends today. You will comply with Alliance directives. You will provide resources. You will submit to order. Refusal is not an option. The channel cut. No negotiation. No dialogue. Kale's hands trembled. Around him, Mira closed her eyes as if she had expected this all along. They saved us, Lear whispered. Doesn't that mean? They're our allies. Kale turned toward him, voice low. Allies ask. Master's command. That night the colony lay half-ruined, its scars glowing faintly in the dark. But amidst the rubble, two truths stood unshakable. The brood had been defeated, and in their place, the Terrans had claimed dominion. Salvation had arrived not as a gift, but as a price. A bargain written in blood and silence. Kale lifted his gaze to the sky, where the Terran fleet drifted like wolves encircling prey. He knew now what survival would cost, not destruction, not freedom, but obedience. The dawn after the battle was strange. Lumen's skies, once scarred with fire, now hung eerily calm. Smoke rose in thin ribbons from shattered domes, drifting lazily upward. The silence was broken only by the heavy thrum of Terran machinery echoing through the colony. Keel walked the ruined surface for the first time since the assault, his crystalline skin catching the pale light. Around him, colonists crept out of shelters, their steps hesitant, eyes wide. They gazed not at the wreckage, but at the figures moving within it. Terran Marines, towering in their armor, planting sensors, erecting barricades, unloading supplies. The colony no longer looked like home. It looked like an occupied world. At the central plaza, a platform had been constructed overnight. Terran banners draped its sides, their emblems stark and alien. At its heart stood Commander Rourke, His armor gleamed under the dim light, his face uncovered at last, weathered, scarred, eyes like granite. Around him, squads of Marines kept watch, weapons at the ready, though no enemy remained. Kale, Mira, and Lear approached cautiously. Other colonists followed, their glowing forms clustering like moths drawn to fire. Rourke scanned them with the calm detachment of a judge measuring criminals. "You are Kale," he said, voice cutting across the square. "The one who sent the beacon." Kale inclined his head. "Yes, I called for aid when the brood came." "You answered. For that we owe our lives." Rourke studied him for a long moment, then spoke. "Your people have lived in secrecy for centuries. Do you know what that means in alliance law?" Kale frowned. "No. It means you are unregistered, unaligned, illegitimate. By rights, this colony should not exist. The only reason you still draw breath is because you are useful. Your mines, your crystals, your location. The Alliance does not waste resources. You will be absorbed." A ripple of fear coursed through the crowd. Lear gripped Kale's arm, his voice trembling. "Absorbed?" Mira's eyes narrowed. "He means conquered." Rourke didn't flinch. "Words don't matter. What matters is survival. Alone you would already be dead. With us you will live. That is the bargain." Kale stepped forward, forcing steadiness into his voice. "You saved us from the brood, but we are not soldiers. We are not weapons. We only wish to live in peace." Rourke's gaze hardened. "Peace is a lie told to children. The galaxy belongs to those strong enough to claim it. You have seen the brood. They will come again, and others worse than them. Do you truly think your fragile domes and tricks could hold against them?" Kale hesitated. He wanted to argue, to shout. But the wreckage around them spoke louder than any words. The Terrans had done in hours what Lumen could not have done in centuries. Rourke raised his voice, addressing the crowd. "Hear me well. From this day forward, Lumen is an outpost of the Terran Alliance. You will provide resources. You will follow Alliance law, and in return, you will live under our protection. Refuse and you will not live at all." The silence that followed was suffocating. Colonists bowed their heads, their dim glow flickering with resignation. Kale's chest burned. He felt the weight of every gaze, every unspoken question. He had called for help, and this was the answer. Mira leaned close, whispering so only he could hear. "You've traded one master for another." Kale's throat tightened. He looked at Rourke, at the Marines, at the banners snapping in the wind. The brood had come to devour. The Terrans had come to rule. And between the two, Lumen's freedom had vanished. The days that followed blurred into routine. Terran patrols marched through Lumen's tunnels, their heavy boots leaving echoes of authority in every chamber. Crates of equipment were stacked in plazas once used for markets. The colony's own systems were stripped, rewired, repurposed to feed the Alliance network. Everywhere Kale walked, he saw his people shrink into themselves, their luminous forms dimming as if afraid to shine too brightly beneath foreign eyes. The brood were gone, burned to ash or drifting as frozen wreckage in orbit. Yet the taste of freedom did not return with their absence. Instead, a new silence settled, the silence of obedience. Kyle sat on the ridge above a shattered dome, the stars sprawling endlessly overhead. A Terran warship drifted in orbit, its silhouette blotting out entire constellations. Lear climbed up beside him, his glow faint in the starlight. "Do you think this is better?" the boy asked softly. Kale looked at him. "Better than death?" "Yes," he paused, his voice heavy. "Better than life on our own?" "I don't know." Lear traced lines in the dust with a trembling finger. "They fight like gods. They walk like storms. I thought I'd feel safe with them here. But I don't." Kale's heart ached. He thought of the beacon, of the desperate choice that had brought the Terrans to their door. He thought of Commander Rourke's words. Peace is a lie told to children. Was this survival? Or merely a slower kind of death? Mira approached quietly, her staff tapping against the crystal ground. She sat beside them, her gaze steady on the stars. "Our ancestors hid us away," she said. "They feared the Terrans as much as the brood. Perhaps they were right." Cal clenched his fists. "What would you have me do? Watch our children torn apart by raiders? At least now they live." "Live," Mira echoed, her tone sharp. "Yes, but without choice, without voice. That is not living. That is waiting." The silence stretched. Above them, the warship shifted position, casting its shadow across the colony below. Lear's voice broke it. "Then what do we do?" Kel did not answer at first. He stared at the stars, distant, endless, filled with powers beyond his comprehension. For a moment, despair threatened to crush him, but beneath it a spark remained, fragile, flickering. "Tomorrow we endure," Kale said finally. "But tomorrow is not forever." Mira tilted her head, studying him. For the first time since the battle, her glow brightened, faint but unmistakable. Kale turned to Lear, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. "Remember this, child, no chain lasts forever. Even those forged in iron and fire." They sat together in silence, three survivors staring into the night. Around them, the colony stirred under its new masters. Above them, warships prowled like wolves, guarding or caging their flock. And in Kale's heart, hidden beneath grief and resignation, a quiet ember smoldered. Not freedom, not yet, but the beginning of something that might one day grow into fire. The story of Lumen does not end here. What you've just witnessed is only a fragment of a greater truth. A truth written in fire, silence, and sacrifice. The colonists survived the brood, but at a cost that echoes louder than any victory. Their freedom has been replaced by chains of protection, and now, the question is no longer what destroyed them, but what will they become? Will Kale and his people learn to endure under Terran rule, bending like reeds in the storm? Or will those quiet embers of defiance ignite into something greater, a flame that could one day burn even the iron banners of the Alliance? That choice, that struggle, is not only theirs. It belongs to all of us who have ever traded liberty for safety, who have ever asked, is survival enough? If these questions stir something inside you, if this journey through shadows and sacrifice has left you thinking long after the screen fades, then join us. Subscribe to Shadows of Truth, where we unravel stories that are more than entertainment. They are mirrors. Mirrors of the choices we make, the chains we accept, and the fire we carry. Don't just watch. Step into the narrative. Add your voice to this growing circle of seekers, dreamers, and fighters who hunger for meaning beneath the surface of stories. The next chapter is waiting. The ember is still burning, and together we decide whether it fades into ash or becomes a fire that can't be contained. Subscribe, share, stay, because the shadows hold more than fear. They hold truth.